Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. Finally, we today resume that legendary book by Sri Sitaram Goel, the probably the most underrated and most underappreciated scholar any country has ever had in terms of how underappreciated and how um, underrated they are. So, today we start the chapter 4 of this legendary book. This is the entire 2 volume set that I'm starting from. The book is called How I Became a not How I Became a Hindu Temples and What Happened to Them. A collection, a documentation with historical evidence from different kinds of sources, from different kinds of languages on what exactly happened to the Hindu temples of India and because of whom such bad things happened to them and did bad things happen to them at all. We find out that a gigantic, a monumental, a tome of a scholarly work. Not many people have read it. I hope my doing live stream while discussing this book and reading this book encourages more people to buy this book, read it and take notes and use them in debates whenever we are faced with these questions that were they even demolished? If they are demolished, do we need them back, etc. And how many were demolished? And how many do we need them back? All sorts of debates. Make your opinions in terms of those questions after reading this book, at least. I think there's basic principles and basic frameworks to always to go to in terms of answering those questions, but this book will help you make an informed decision and informed choices. Let's start this. Okay, so in the last day's live stream when we were discussing this book, just if you haven't watched the first part of this live stream, type How I Became a Hindu, College Street, Kolkata, and part 1. This is part 2 as mentioned in the name of the title of the YouTube video. While discussing this 4th chapter, I think 1 or 2 pages later, my power cut happened in my home, so we could not finish it. So we are going to start from chapter 4 from the beginning itself, and it's going to be a nice recap as well. So let's start. In the name of religion, Sitaram Goel. We shall now take up the explanation provided by the theology of Islam derived from the Quran and the Hadith. Ibn Ishaq, the first biographer of the Prophet, devotes many pages to a description of Arab polytheism at the time when Islam started taking shape. Every Arab household, he tells us, had an idol of some god or goddess. He also gives the name of many idols which were housed in sanctuaries maintained by different tribes across the Arab Peninsula. The Kaaba at Makkah, which housed 360 idols, was only one of these sanctuaries, though it was the most prestigious. One of the idols in the Kaaba was named Allah. Although it had some primacy over other idols, it was far from being an exclusive deity. Besides, there were many sacred groves and places of pilgrimage visited by Arabs on special occasions. One of them was, in fact, even Somnath Mandir. So, who is saying this? This is being said by Ibn Ishaq. At the same time, Ibn Ishaq informs us that monotheism was becoming an attractive creed among some sections of the Arab elite. It was the creed of the Roman, Iranian, and Abyssinian empires which inspired awe and admiration among the Arabs at that time. Many Jews and Christians were present, individually or in communities, in the more important Arab towns. These people of the book took great pride in their worship of the one and only God and looked down upon the Arabs who had had no prophet, who possessed no book, and who worshipped stones and stocks. They aroused a sense of inferiority in the minds of those Arabs who came in close contact with them, but were not equipped with an alternate theology that could defend their own gods and goddesses. Such Arabs looked forward to the day when Arabia also would have a prophet and a book of its own. Those who have compared the Bible and the Quran know how close the two are in spirit and language on the subject of idols and idol worshippers. Like Jehovah of the Bible, Allah also advances his claim to be the one and only God. He denounces the mushriks or idolaters as the doubly damned, twice damned. As the doubly damned category of kafirs or unbelievers when compared to the other category, the people of the book. The idols, proclaims Allah while abrogating the so-called satanic verses, are mere names invented by the ancestors of the Arabs. They have neither eyes, nor ears, nor hands, nor feet, and can therefore neither help nor harm. This was in fact the argument put forward by Abraham himself when he destroyed some idols in his village. They have neither eyes nor ears, and he said that, see, I prove to you that your idols can't save you. If they couldn't even save themselves from getting destroyed, why and how would they save you? That was Abraham's justification for destroying idols. They have neither eyes nor ears, nor hands nor feet, and can therefore neither help nor harm. They cannot respond to prayers and will fail to save their worshippers from Bel on the day of judgment. They will themselves burn in the fire of hell together with those who worship them. Meanwhile, they render their worshippers napak, abominable, in the eyes of Allah. In the early days of Islam, Muslims were too weak to practice iconoclasm at Makkah. Iconoclasm meaning destroying idols. Dipangshu, but the context is we are discussing this book, this famous book, how Hindu temples and what happened to them by Sita Goel. In the early days of Islam, Muslims were too weak to practice iconoclasm at Makkah because their numbers were not that high. They had to rest content with expressing their contempt for idols. Food which had first been offered to idols was spurned. Food which had first been offered to idols, okay? So, sort of like what we do today. Names which referred to some pagan gods or goddesses were changed as soon as the bearers entered the fold of Islam. As soon as the people bearing those names entered the fold of Islam. But the clarion call had come. Herd them together, said Allah, those who commit transgression and those whom they worship, and start them on the road to hellfire. This is mentioned in Quran 37.22 to 37.23. The Prophet saw Amir bin Lubai dragging his intestines in fire. Amir was a 2nd century king supposed to have brought idols from Syria and set them up in Arabia. Medina, where Muslims were stronger, witnessed some acts of iconoclasm even before the Prophet migrated to that city. Ibn Ishaq tells us how the idol of Amir ibn al-Jamuh was stolen at night by a group of Muslims and thrown into a cesspit, again and again till Amir lost faith in it and became a Muslim. At nearby Kuba, Sahel broke up the idols of his tribe at night and took the pieces to a Muslim woman who used them as fuel. The Prophet made iconoclasm a pious performance for all Muslims for all time to come when he practiced it himself on the very day he conquered Makkah. When the Prophet, writes Ibn Ishaq, prayed the noon prayer on the day of the conquest, he ordered that all the idols which were round the Kaaba should be collected and burnt with fire and broken up. Citing some other sources, the Encyclopedia of Islam says, Muhammad, when he entered Makkah as victor, is stated to have struck them in the eyes with the end of his bow before he had them dragged down and destroyed by fire. Pictorial representations of Ali standing on the shoulders of the Prophet and tearing down the idol of Hubal from top of a Kaaba wall have been published by Shias. I see. Soon after, expeditions were sent to other parts of Arabia for doing what had been done at Makkah. Idols were smashed and temples destroyed or converted into mosques everywhere. Muslim poets vied with each other to record the events in rapturous verse. Fazl bin Mulawi sang, "Had you seen Muhammad and his troops the day the idols were smashed when he entered, you would have seen God's light become manifest in darkness covering the face of idolatry." And Ka'b bin Malik wrote, We forsook Allat, Al-Uzza and Wud. We stripped off their necklaces and earrings. And Al-Mustaghir bin Rabia, who was a warrior as well as a poet, said, I smashed Ruda so completely that I left it a black ruin in a hollow. Growing Islam, concludes the Encyclopedia of Islam, was from the very beginning intent upon the destruction of all traces of pagan idolatry and was so successful, and the antiquarians so successful that the antiquarians of the 2nd and 3rd century of the Hadira could glean only very scanty details. Some of the idols were made use for other purposes, as for example the idol Dhul Kalasa, which was worshipped at Tabala, a place on the road from Makkah to Yemen in the time of Ibn al-Kalbi, about 200 AD, was used as a stepping stone under the door of the mosque at Tabala. Other stones which had been worshipped as idols were actually used as cornerstones of the Kaaba. Muslim historians tell us on the authority of the Prophet that idolaters of Arabia had set up idols in places which were meant to be mosques when they were established for the first time by Abraham. Interesting. That idolaters of Arabia had set up idols in places which were meant to be mosques when they were established for the first time by Abraham. The mosque of Kaaba, we are told, had been built by Abraham at the very center of the earth. Those who dismiss Rama as mythological gossip and denying him a place of birth at Ayodhya may well inquire whether Abraham was a historical person who actually presided over the building of the Kaaba. It is, however, recorded history that the armies of Islam did everywhere what had been done in Arabia as they advanced to Iran, Khorasan, Transoxiana, meaning the Russia Central Asia area, Sistan, Afghanistan, and India. Hundreds of thousands of fire temples of the Zoroastrians, Buddhist monasteries, and Hindu temples disappeared or yielded place to mosques, ziyarats, and dargahs. Modern archaeology has reconstructed what happened along the trail of Islamic invasion of all these ancient lands. Maulana Minhajus Siraj, the 13th century historian, sums up the theology of Islam vis-a-vis in case of idols and idol temples when he comes to Mahmud of Ghazni in his Tabqati Nasri. He was endowed, he writes, with great virtues and vast abilities, and the same predominant star was in the ascendant at his birth, as appeared at the dawn of Islam itself. When Sultan Mahmud ascended the throne of sovereignty, his illustrious deeds became manifest unto all mankind within the pale of Islam, when he converted so many thousands of idol temples into masjids and captured many of the cities of Hindustan. He led an army to Naharwala of Gujarat and brought away Al-Manat, one of the three female deities that pre-Islamic Arabia worshipped. And brought away Manat, the idol from Somnath, and had it broken into 4 parts, one of which was cast before the center of the great masjid at Ghaznin, the second before the gateway of the Sultan's palace, and the third and fourth were sent to Makkah and Medina respectively. Mahmud's coins struck at Lahore in the seventh year of his reign describe him as the right hand of the caliph and the breaker of idols. उसका नाम क्या था? बुतशिकनी करना. This is the simple and straightforward explanation of why Islamic invaders desecrated the idols of Hindu gods and goddesses, destroyed Hindu temples, and converted them into mosques. It covers all facts completely and consistently and leaves no loopholes. Footnote says, when Muhammad entered the Kaaba after his conquest of Makkah by overwhelming force, he declared, "Truth has come and falsehood has vanished." This is mentioned in Sahih Muslim 4397. Ram Swarup comments, it takes more than an invading army or crusaders or a demolition squad with sledgehammers to establish the domain of truth. Similarly, it is not that easy to get over falsehood. True spiritual demolition involves the demolition of desire gods and ego gods. So well said. The demolition of the false gods that reside in conceited theologies, in pretentious revelations and fond belief. This is from the book Understanding Islam Through Hadith, Voice of India. Voice of India is Sitaram Goel's own publication house. Second footnote says, the Prophet of Islam gave not only a new religion to his countrymen, but also a new history of Arabia, the same as the prophets of secularism have been doing in India since the days of Pandit Nehru's dominance. This is Sitaram Goel's own footnote. Next article. This book is basically a collection of articles. So this article is by Ram Swarup. I should have put him in the thumbnail. I did not know even his articles are here. Okay, let's see some comments now. Sitaram Goel before going woke. When did Sitaram Goel go woke? What are you talking about? Which book? Abhay is saying you have a stream on your Bengali channel today. Most probably. I'll try to. Shondhe ba rater dike. If I have some energy left after this live stream and time. Shail Sharma is saying, your views on Kushal Mehra and Abhijit gang, even after abusing Brahmins, he wasn't ready to bend a bit. They weren't abusing Brahmins, because then that would mean they were abusing Sham Sharma as well. They were abusing people who deny that any atrocity happened. But their tone is problematic because I don't think they mean it that way, because they know the facts. The thing is that Yes, Brahmins did bad things. Yes, Brahmins preserved text. Yes, Brahmins did great things. And yes, not all Brahmins were of the same hierarchy. Brahmins of different castes, different jatis inside the Brahmin Varna also had different status in the society. But also, even atrocities, not letting people enter temples or considering them untouchable, or just behaving badly towards people. These sorts of things were done by people from every varna and every jati. So it's a huge low IQ debate that's going on in between them. Um, he was communist initially. Yeah, I was communist until 2018 April. Wait, who wrote Love, Jihad and Other Myth? I don't know. Is that a name of the book? He was communist. Oh, you are talking about Sitaram Goel. Yes, yes. Sitaram Goel was communist until his second year of college. Then he read so much that he stopped being a communist. Okay. So, a need to face the truth, Ram Swaroop. The article Hideaway Communalism from Indian Express, February 5, 1989 is usual. It discusses a question which has been a taboo and speaks on it with a frankness rare among Indian intellectuals. Similarly, in his articles The Tip of an Iceberg and In the Name of Religion, Sitaram Goel brings to the subject unequaled research and discusses it in a larger historical perspective. In the history of Islam, iconoclasm and razing, meaning destroying other people's temples, are not aberrations or stray acts of zealous but misguided rulers. But, in fact, they are central to the faith. They derive their justification and validity from the Quranic revelation and the Prophet's sunnah or practice. It is another matter, though, that these could not always be implemented in their full theological rigor due to many unfavorable circumstances, an externality for which Islamic theology makes ample provisions. Early Islam. Zenith Kuho is saying, as a Mondol SC, I actually side neutral in that Abhijit Brahmin fiasco. I think he was in the right that Brahmin have skipped reconciliation, but also he fails to mention. Exactly, Zenith Kuho, well said. That is why it's an absolutely irrelevant and a time waste of a debate to look into or take sides in. Early Islam. Shrines and idols of the unbelievers began to be destroyed during the Prophet's own time, and indeed, at his own behest. Siratun Nabi, the first pious biography of the Prophet, tells us how, during the earliest days of Islam, young men at Medina, influenced by Islamic teachings, repeatedly crept into a house every night and carried its idol and threw it on its face into a cesspit, exactly what even Abraham himself had done. However, desecration and destruction began in earnest when Makkah was conquered. Ali was chosen to destroy the idols at Kaaba, which we are told he did mounting on the shoulders of the Prophet. Umar was chosen for destroying the pictures on the walls of the shrine. After this, as Tariq-i-Tabri tells us, raiding parties were sent in all directions to destroy the images of deities held in special veneration by different tribes, including the images of Al-Manat, Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, intercessories of the satanic verses. Saad was sent to destroy the shrine of Al-Manat, the deity of the tribes of Aus and Khazraj. When the shrine of Al-Lat was invaded, its devotees resisted, but finding themselves overpowered, they surrendered and became Muslims. The women worshippers wept to see how their deity was, quote-unquote, deserted by her servants who did not show enough manliness in defending her. Her, in this case, are the goddesses. Saad, interestingly, is the surname of now Gad Saad, who's a Jew, a very famous scientist and philosopher, YouTuber even, famous podcast guest in different big podcasts. A friend of Rajiv Malhotra. He has hosted Rajiv Malhotra himself on his podcast. Similarly, Walid was sent by the Prophet to destroy the idol of Al-Uzza at Nakhla, venerated by the tribes of Kinan and Nadar. Overawed, the guardians left the deity to defend herself, they called out. Overawed, the guardians left the deity to defend herself. They called out, O Uzza, make an annihilating attack on Khalid. O Uzza, if you do not kill the man Khalid, then bear a swift punishment or become a Christian. Why Christian? The word should have been Muslim. It seems the tradition belongs to the very early period of Islam when, at least on the popular level, Christians and Muslims were mistaken for each other. For both shared a common outlook, both indulged in forced conversions and both destroyed shrines belonging to others. Now, Semitic revelation. The fact is that the revelation of the Prophet of Islam does not stand alone. It is rooted in the older Judaic revelation from which Christianity also derives. The two revelations differ in some particulars, but they have important similarities. The God of both is exclusive and brooks no rivals, no partner. He demands exclusive loyalty and commands that his followers would worship no other God. But though so demanding in their worship, he does not make himself known to them directly. So, on the other hand, he communicates his will to them indirectly through a favorite messenger or prophet or a special incarnation. This God is so different from God in other religious traditions. For example, in Hindu tradition, a God is not exclusive. He lives in friendliness. He lives in friendliness with other gods. In fact, other gods are his own manifestations. In this tradition, he also has no rigid form and is conceived in widely different ways, plurally, singly, monastically. He also recognizes no single favorite intermediary but reveals himself to all who approach him with devotion and in wisdom. No Semitic protocol here. The Hindu tradition also accords fullest freedom of worship. Not only everyone has a right to worship his God in his own way, but every God is also entitled to the worship of his own devotees. Freedom indeed, both for men as well as for gods. It was on this principle that early Christians enjoyed their freedom of worship. Chosen people. The other side of the coin of a jealous God is the concept of a chosen people or a church or ummah. The chosen God has a chosen people and even his chosen enemies. Both assist each other. While their gods help the believers in fighting their neighbors, the believers help their God in fighting his rival gods. It is common for men and women everywhere to invoke the help of their gods in their various undertakings, big or small. But the God of the believers also calls upon them to fight for his greater glory, to fight his enemies and to extend his dominion on the earth. In short, they are to become his swordsmen and salesmen, his witness, his martyrs and ghazis. They must fight not only their unbelieving neighbors but also even more specifically their neighbors, their gods. For these gods are not only the gods of their enemies, but they are also the enemies of their God, right? Which is even worse. The believers have taken this God-given mission seriously. The Hidayah or guidance, the Muslim law book par excellence, quotes the Prophet and lays down, quote, "We are directed to make war upon men until such time as they shall confess, there is no God but Allah." Earthly reward. However, it is not all God and his glory all the time. The undertaking has its practical side too. The Crusaders are not without their earthly rewards. They work to extend the sovereignty of their God and in the process their own too. A pious tradition proclaims that the earth belongs to Allah and his Prophet. Therefore, the inescapable conclusion is that the infidels are merely squatters, meaning sort of outsiders. The inescapable conclusion is that the infidels are merely squatters and they should be dispossessed and the land returned to its rightful owners, the believers. Today, the intellectual fashion is to emphasize the political and economic aims of imperialism and to neglect its theological component. But history shows that the most durable imperialisms have been those which had the support of a continuing theological motive, which decolonial scholars say this sort of a theology behind colonialism was what they diagnose as coloniality. Such imperialisms dominated without a conscience, or rather, whatever conscience they had supported their domination. The power of faith killed all possible doubts and self-criticism. Hideaway communalism quotes extensively from the foreword of Maulana Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi, which he contributed to the book Hindustan Under Islamic Rule. These quotes show that in its self-estimation and self-righteousness, the white man's burden of civilizing the world is a poor match to Islam's responsibility of bringing the earth under Allah and his Prophet, because you are in Jahiliyat and you need to be brought into the Roshni of Islam. Iconoclasm. Semitic my-godism, described as monotheism, has another dimension, iconoclasm. In fact, the two are two sides of the same coin. When worshippers of the Semitic god came into contact with their neighbors, It was not clear what they abhorred more, their gods or their idols. In point of fact, they made no such fine distinction. Trained as they were, they made war on both indiscriminately. The Judaic God commands his worshippers that when they enter the land of their enemies, they will destroy their altars and break their images and cut down their groves and burn their graves images with fire. This is mentioned in Bible Deutt 7.5. Perhaps the Judaic revelation was meant to apply only to the territory of the promised land. But when Christianity and in due course Islam became its proud inheritors and adopted the biblical God, its operation became university. Wherever the two creeds went, temple raising, temple destruction followed. Today, Christianity seems to present a different face, but during the better part of its career, it was stoutly iconoclastic in the Mediterranean countries, in Northern Europe, in Asia, and the two Americas. It destroyed shrines of the pagans with unparalleled thoroughness and perfect self-satisfaction. When America was discovered, the Benedictine monks who came in the train of Columbus boasted of having destroyed single-handedly 170,000 images in Haiti alone. Juan de Zumarraga, the first bishop of Mexico, writing as early as 1531 AD, claimed that he destroyed 500 temples and 20,000 idols of the heathens. In our own country in Goa, Jesuit fathers destroyed many Hindu temples. Islam did the same. Wherever it went, it carried fire and sword and destroyed the temples of the conquered people. Goel has documented some of the cases, but as he himself says, they represent merely the tip of an iceberg. New subchapter begins, Islam's religious policy. Let me check some comments. Abhay is saying, my argument with AIM is that he said that we cannot correct religious historical wrongs. If so, caste historical wrongs too need to be corrected. Yes, religious historical wrongs need to be corrected because those same religious people are doing the same wrongs today, more or less. And caste historical wrongs are also happening in some places, but also very, very less in number. Although I don't know how fair is it to say it's very less in number. Who knows what's going on in the villages? But it's a mix of atrocities, oppression, and syncretism. So yeah, but historical wrongs can't be righted through reservation. Conveniently ignoring that caste historical wrongs are already being corrected through exactly. Yeah, and since I had been quote tweeting him and saying that when he was saying that historical wrongs need to be we need to stop caring about historical wrongs at some point. I said that, and or you need to talk about casteism. I said that yes, casteism's historical wrongs are being corrected through reservation already. He said in some later podcast, probably responding to these ideas, that casteism reservations are not in fact a writing of historical wrongs. He says, and he said that I don't have the time to mention it right now, but I will explain someday, some other day, that reservation is something about else completely. Well, if it is something about, if it is about something else completely, then it has to be about poverty, right? So if it is about poverty, let's not mention caste. Just let's see what's the poverty level. Let's check income tax statements and stuff of the parents, etc. Cheap Thrills, Srinivasan Jain. Root issue with Kushal and AIM's arguments are that they want Hindus to limit themselves to the socio-political interests of BJP RSS when it comes to Hindu interests. See, again, this becomes a very low IQ debate, whether it's the caste debate between J. Sai Deepak and AIM Kushal, or the breaking of caste endogamy debate between Harsh Madhusoodan and a lot of traditionalists. It always becomes a low IQ debate because we are not. All of them are ignoring the idea of consent when these things we are talking about, whether asking for reclaiming temples, etc., or talking about marrying someone. It's going to come down to individuals and individual families at best, okay? So there, no ideology is going to work really unless the ideology makes parents say to the child that no, you can't marry that person because they are from a different caste, okay? And if the child agrees, so be it. If the child is happy listening to their parents and letting go of their love, who cares? Why do we need to go and tell him that no, you have to not listen to your parents because breaking caste endogamy is good for society. How does that work? Or conversely, even the traditionalists are wrong here to counter Harsh Madhusudan saying that no, we will not give Brahmin girls, etc. What a weird thing to say. How are you going to stop Brahmin girls who are by consent falling in love with people from other castes or lower castes? So it's a absolutely low IQ, ego-driven debate. There's nothing scholarly about this horseshit that's going on from all these absolutely gigantically scholarly people. I don't know what's happening, what Twitter does to these people's brains. Don't you think that Zoroastrian and Jews are to the Middle East what Native Americans and polytheists are to Americas? Yes, but you see, the reason for their demise in those places was also born in that place itself. It's not like outsiders came in and drove them out, so it's not exactly like Native Americans. Islam's religious policy. Like its monotheism, Semitic iconoclasm too was essentially a hegemonistic idea. No imperialism is secure unless it destroys the pride, culture, and valor of a conquered people. People who retain their religions, their gods, and their priests make poor subjects and remain potential rebels. Islam knew this and it developed a full fledged theory of religious domination. Temples were destroyed not for their hoarded wealth, as Marxist historians propagate. Whoever heard of Hindus being especially in the habit of hoarding their wealth in their temples? Nor were they destroyed by invaders in the first flush of their victory. Yeah, this is one important distinction that Ramswarup makes here, that it was not personal wealth that was being hoarded in temples. Personal wealth was in the homes only. It was the wealth of the deity itself, and also used in a religio-socio-economically valid way to give out those gold as loans to people, merchants, to go out, do business, fund their journeys, and come back and pay an interest back to the temple. Nor were they destroyed by invaders in the first flush of their victory. On the other hand, these formed a part of a larger policy of religious persecution, which has followed in peacetime too. Okay, not just during war, even in peacetime, when the Muslim rule was established. The policy of persecution had a purpose. It was meant to keep down the people and to disarm them culturally and spiritually, to destroy their pride and self-respect, and to remind them that they were zimmis, an inferior breed. Vinay Singh is saying, please read my comment. Why not we industrialize bottom up? For example, a caste who used to sing song should start a band and achieve excellence in it. How do you industrialize that? How do you know someone who is singing has the talent to keep up a band? Most people who start bands, even with their own money and with their own intentions, can't keep up a band for more than 5 months. How is government funding going to change this? At best, what they can do is provide like rehearsal rooms, etc. And the government funds so many useless things that there's no market for anyway. And you see what Ramswarup mentions here, policy of persecution, it was to disarm them culturally and spiritually. You see, and this is one genius of Islam, I'll have to admit, that they understood, if at all you really want to invade and destroy a society, not just invade, if you really want to destroy a society, take away their cultural congregation points and their cultural places of cultural pride, and their moral center, their educational centers. Now temples were all at the same place, right? Temple was all of these things. Now for that reason, when they attack USA, they don't destroy any church. They have no problems with churches in USA. Maybe a little bit of that might be because they have some sympathy for Christianity, but also they did destroy the World Trade Center, which is the equivalent of temples for Hindus. Because if we look at the world as divided between Varnas, USA is a Vaishya-driven society. It's a society run by merchants and capitalists, right? And so Taliban and Al-Qaeda knew that, not Taliban, Al-Qaeda knew that World Trade Center is their is the heart of their spirit. Okay, that's the spirit of their existence. That's the spirit of their society. That's their cultural congregation point. Come together, let's make money. And so they destroyed that. According to this policy, Zimmis were allowed to exercise their religion in low key so long as they accepted civic and political disabilities and paid jizya in abasement. Yeah, this is what people don't understand when they say that Muslim king donated money for this temple. So many small Hindu temples today exist in Bengal which were built during the Muslim rule, and there was the culture of Durga Puja pandals which are temporary mysteriously. Why do you need a temporary pandal that you can only build for 4 days and then deconstruct it? So you see, all that came at the cost of paying jizya and accepting a second or third level of citizenship. So long as they accepted civic and political disabilities. There were many restrictions, particularly in cities. The Muslim law, Hidayah, lays down that as the tokens of Islam, such as the public prayers, festivals, and so forth, appear in the cities, Zimmis should not be permitted to celebrate the tokens of infidelity there. Some of these restrictions placed on Hindu processions and celebrations still continue. This is a legacy of the Muslim period. Yeah, I don't know if it is so now, but when I was growing up, at least for the time being, Holi used to be banned in the Park Circus area or even the Park Street area, I think, in Kolkata, which are majorly Muslim. This is a legacy of the Muslim period. The same law laid down that the infidels could not build new temples, though they could repair old ones. Probably this explains why there is no record of a worthwhile Hindu temple built since 1192 AD in Delhi. The first such temple, Lakshmi Narain Mandir, inaugurated by Mahatma Gandhi, came up in 1938 after a lapse of more than 700 years. No easy solution. The foregoing discussion, the prior discussion, that shows that the problem is not that of the Ram Janmabhoomi of Ayodhya, or the Krishna Janmabhoomi of Mathura, or the Vishveshwara temple of Varanasi. In its deeper aspect, the problem relates to an aggressive theology and political ideology which created an aggressive tradition of history. Needless to say that the problem in all its huge dimensions admits of no easy solution. In an ordinary situation, one could appeal from Philip drunk to Philip sober, from a man's passion to his reason and conscience. But in the present case, when Islamic theology is on the side of its historical practice and its more aggressive aims, this option is hardly available. But even then, while showing by exercising firmness that aggression will not pay, we must yet be patient and understanding. We must realize that the problem is not Muslims but Islam or Islamic theology. Therefore, this theology needs a more critical examination than has been hitherto done. We must properly study revelatory religions, their gods and their prophets, their theories of special covenants and favored ummahs, their doctrine of one God and two humanities, the believers and non-believers, their categories of believers and infidels or pagans, their theory of prophetism, their divinely ordained mission to convert and crusade. These are the things we need to look at. It is a task which needs the creative labor of all seekers and articulators of truth. Closed creeds are a threat both to deeper spirituality and to deeper humanity, and they badly need some sort of glasnost, openness and freedom. A wider discussion will help them to open up. In this task, Muslim intellectuals can play an important role. In fact, it is expected of them. It may start a new process of rethinking among the Muslims on their fundamentals, a different and truer sort of fundamentalism that they have hitherto known. You see, this is what I've been saying in some live streams, that whether you will be a fundamentalist and an evil fundamentalist or not depends on what your fundamentals are, first of all. But also, this is what exactly we are seeing today, no? This is BJP and RSS pursuing this with tooth and nail, that create more Muslim intellectuals who are against killing of Hindus and oppressing Hindus, etc. So let's see what happens with that. But anytime that has been tried, or anytime some Muslim intellectual has tried cutting out a new path, their hindrance has come mainly from their peers, their rivals in Marxism. Marxist intellectuals have forever prevented progressive Muslims from taking a stand or getting popularity. So today you must remember that on the intellectual side, your biggest enemy still is Marxism. Not Marxists, but Marxism. And so we need to keep that in check first and foremost, so that they don't cause a hindrance again in the path of progressive Muslim intellectuals. It is also a task which imposes an inescapable duty on Hindu and Buddhist thinkers with their inheritance of yoga. In fact, India's yoga has a lot to contribute to the discussion. And no wonder Saudi Arabia and UAE is promoting yoga. I wonder what conversations have gone on between the nation heads of these three countries, UAE, India, and Saudi Arabia. This psyche in turn has its contribute to discussions. India's yoga has a lot to contribute to the discussions. We are told that revelations come from gods, but from another angle, revelations and gods themselves come from man and his psyche, as yoga teaches us. This psyche in turn has its various levels of purity and inwardness, and every level projects its own god, revelation, and theology. Therefore, not all gods and revelations have the same purity. In fact, some of them are not worthy enough, and they support an equally questionable politics. Such a conclusion may disappoint many Hindu wise men who fondly citing to the belief that all religions are the same and all prophets preach and say the same things. But they must learn not to evade issues, and even while seeking unities, they must yet learn to recognize differences where they exist. At the end, we again return to hideaway communalism, which tells us of evasion and concealment and the need to face the truth. However, the sorry fact is that in order to avoid facing truth, we have built up an elaborate system of evasion and concealment, which protects not merely hideaway communalism, but also shields and even fosters more sinister forces of a hideaway imperialism and a hideaway theology, which distorts relations between man and God and between man and man. The need is to become aware of the problem at a deeper level and in its larger antecedents and consequences. This article is from June 18, 1989. Written by Ram Swarup on Indian Express. So many articles on Indian Express. Who is the true God? SK Sahil is saying, when your gods cannot only protect their own temples, how will they save your devotees? And isn't destruction of temples a proof? It's a wake-up call to stop worshipping false gods. No, it's not. Let's see if someone takes up this discussion in the comment section. I'll give my thoughts later on. Let's go through the book more first and foremost. Historians versus history. Again written by Ram Swarup. Vol Soinka, African Nobel laureate, delivering the 20th century Nehru Memorial Lecture on November 30, 1988, made an important, though by no means a new observation, that the colonial histories have been written from the European viewpoint. Speaking about Indian histories, he said that there is a big question mark on everything that the British historians have written. He added that serious efforts are being made by historians back home to rewrite African history. Yeah. They have not succeeded at it, and if they have succeeded, they have said that now even Buddha was a black man. We do not know what this project involves and how it is faring in Africa, but in India, efforts in this direction have yielded meager results. Not that there has been a dearth of rewriters, but their talent has not been equal to their zeal. The phrase rewriting of history leaves a bad taste in the mouth, and it is offensive to our sense of truth. Recent instances of rewriting have not helped to improve the image of the task, and they inspired little confidence. In most cases, one did not know where legitimate rewriting ended and forgery began. In practical terms, it has meant that history is written to support the latest party line or the latest dictator. What does, therefore, rewriting of history mean? How far can we go in that direction? Does it mean saying goodbye to all sense of truth and objectivity, or does it mean only restoring some neglected truths and perspective? Some have looked at our present through the eyes of the past, but will it be any better to look at our past through the eyes of the present? Or even go further and write about our past and present in the spirit of socialist realism in terms of the future, in terms of tasks conceived and planned by our avant-garde for the future of the century, for future of the country. There are other related questions. Is the European history of Asia and Africa all wrong, and does it need wholesale replacement? Or does it also have some valuable elements, particularly in its methodology, if not in its conclusions, which should be retained and even further developed? Well said. In the Indian context, is the British history of India monolithic, all painted black by motivated historians? Or is it also pluralistic and contains many views, some of them highly appreciative of the country's culture, philosophy, and artistic creations? Yeah, true. And also looked at objectively, apart from the intentions of the writers and even in spite of their jaundiced views, have not their histories sometimes helped us to become better aware of our past and made us in some ways rediscover ourselves in the limited sense in which the words past and rediscovery are understood today? To hold that all British history of India was wrong will be highly unrealistic and will have few buyers. True, many British historians were prejudiced, but there were also others who had genuine curiosity, and in spite of their preconceived notions, they tried to do their job faithfully in the spirit of objectivity, like the historian of Tantra, Sir John Woodruff. In the pursuit of their researches, they applied methods followed in Europe. They collected, collated, and compared old manuscripts. They deciphered old, forgotten scripts and in the process discovered an important segment of our past. They developed linguistics, archaeology, carbon dating, numismatics. They found for us ample evidence of India in Asia. Aha, what a sentence. They found ample evidence for India in Asia. They discovered for us much new data, local and international. True, many times they tried to twist this data and put fanciful constructions on it, but this new respect for facts imposed its own discipline and tended to evolve objective criteria. Because of the objective nature of the criteria, their findings did not always support their prejudices and preconceived notions. For example, their data proved that India represented an ancient culture with remarkable continuity and widespread influence, and that it had a long and well-established tradition of self-rule and self-governing republics and free institutions and free discussion. It was found out because of the research done by British themselves. However, while admitting these positive factors, it is also true that the British historians distorted Indian history on... Guys, I have to admit something. This is the first time I'm reading Ramswarup's writings, okay? I have heard Ramswarup ever since I heard of Sitaram Goel, but this is the first time I'm reading Ramswarup's works, and I must say I'm very, very impressed already. What a balanced, calm, and honest, not ego-driven way of writing. This is what I like. This is what needs to happen more and more. This is what has almost never happened in India in mainstream Marxist academics, and even the right wingers are some right wing authors are giving them a run for their money in terms of writing dishonest and ego-driven works. But look at Ramswarup, look at Sitaram Goel, learn from these people. However, while admitting these positive factors, it is also true that the British historians distorted Indian history on some most essential points. The distortion was not conscious, but was unconscious. Exactly. This is my point. You have to first steelman their arguments, and you have to first also admit to yourself and try to find out whether they were doing this intentionally and deliberately or not. Because that is important, because then you might come to the conclusion that they were in fact dishonest and bad people, and therefore their work ends up having less integrity. But in many cases we will find out that they were not doing this deliberately. The distortion was not conscious but unconscious. However, it was not less real and potent on that account. Yeah, the distortion was still a potent distortion. The mind of British scholars was shaped by their position as rulers of a fast expanding empire and by its need to consolidate itself ideologically and politically. As rulers, they felt a new racial and cultural superiority, and reinforced by their religion, developed a strong conviction of their civilizing mission. Many of them also felt a great urge to bring the blessings of Christian morals and a Christian God to a benighted paganhood, as long as the attempt did not endanger the empire. The rulers had also more palpable political needs. The subjected people, the prajas, should have no higher notion of their past beyond their present status, which they should also learn to accept without murmur and even without thankfulness. That was the British view, obviously. The British rulers had an interest in telling the Indian people that the latter had never been a nation but a conglomerate of miscellaneous people drawn from diverse sources and informed by no principle of unity. That their history had been a history of invaders and conquerors, and that they had never known indigenous rule. And that indeed they were indifferent to self rule, and that so long as their village life was intact, they did not bother who ruled at the center. All these lessons were tirelessly taught and dutifully learnt, so much so that even after the British have left, these assumptions and categories still shape our larger political thinking and historical perspective. That India is multiracial, multinational, multilinguistic, multicultural, painfully trying to acquire a principle of unity under their aegis is also the assumption of our own new leaders and elite. Now, why is the word multinational said in the context of inside India? Because in this context, nation means a people, a qawm, okay? These were the basic attitudes. Now, when that famous term "two nation," we are a people of two nations. That term was not mentioned in the sense of nation state. Okay, it was meant as two qawms, two different people who really can't live with each other. These were the basic attitudes and unspoken interests that shaped the minds of the British historians, but within this framework, there was room enough for individual preferences and temperamental peculiarities. Some of them could show their genuine appreciation for Hindu language, grammar, architecture, and other cultural achievements. But this appreciation would not go beyond a certain point, nor in a direction which began to feed the people's wider national consciousness and pride in themselves as an ancient nation. In this respect, too, our intellectual elite follow the lead of the British scholars. Many of them, unless they are Marxists or Macaulaysts, are not without a measure of appreciation and pride for some of our old cultural traditions. But this appreciation does not extend to that larger culture itself which put forth those creations, and that have some valuable elements, particularly in its methodology, if not in its conclusions, which should be retained and even further developed. Okay, no, I did not turn the page. Lol. Wait. But this appreciation does not extend to that larger culture itself, which puts forth these creations. Exactly. कहाँ से आया ये सब अच्छे चीज़ें? कहाँ से आया ये secularism or acceptance? Put forth those creations, and that religion and spirit in which that culture was rooted, and those people and that society which upheld that religion and that culture, they are not given any credit. We are told that the British highlighted Hindu-Muslim differences. They certainly did. But they had no interest in telling the Indians that their forefathers shared a common religion, that some of them got converted under peculiar circumstances, that those circumstances were no longer valid, and that they should not lose their consciousness of their original and wider faith. On the other hand, the way the British wrote their history perpetuated the myth of a Muslim rule and a Muslim period which could not but accentuate Hindu-Muslim differences and promote Muslim separatism. One thing that's being mentioned here repeatedly by Ramswarup is exactly what I agree with when people are criticizing me for reading Barclay's paper, or even Dirk's or Declan Quigley's paper for that matter. See, whenever I read something or whenever I read a book or a paper, even if I discuss it from my own channel, even if I appreciate it, doesn't mean I agree with everything mentioned in that work, okay? Especially when it comes to papers, people are saying that in some speeches Barclay has explicitly shown her tendency of being anti-Savarkar, but I'm being naive and looking at her, basing my opinions of her based on my reading of some of her papers. But you see, that is really fair, because if you objectively think that, if you think objectively judging her by her speeches and lectures is a fair thing to do, then why shouldn't I judge her only by her papers? Why is a video and a speech objectively better than a paper? First of all, it's not. A paper is where she has fleshed out, well thought out ideas with evidences, sources, citations, etc. But in a speech, everyone gets carried away a little, okay? And my claim is not that Barclay is a great Savarkar right now. That is not what I'm saying. I'm mainly saying that Look at the research for what it is. You don't have to agree with the conclusions. Really good scholars like Aisha Jalal, Savarkar, etc., or not Savarkar, Aisha Jalal, Bakle, etc., they come up with research which you can look with an objective eye, and come up with your own conclusions. The conclusion of Bakle will be based on whatever else she has read, whatever her biases are. You have read some other things and you have your own biases. You look at what evidence she is presenting in the body of the paper, not the goddamn conclusion, okay? Which is why Aisha Jalal, even though she's a Marxist historian, is so heavily quoted by right-wing authors like J. Sai Deepak, okay? Because her research work has been honest. That is exactly what Ramswarup is saying here. Fuck the conclusions. Read the research. Okay. The main interest of the British was to write a history which justified their presence in India. They were imperial rulers, and by their situation and function, they felt a bond of sympathy and affinity with the rulers that had preceded them. They held India by the right of conquest, therefore they had to recognize the legitimacy of this right in the case of the Mughals, the Afghans and the Arabs too. But this justification was too crude and naked for the British conscience. To assuage it, to justify it, or to escape from it, the British offered a legal and moral alibi. They held that they were legitimate successors of the Mughals and represented continuity with India's past. The Mughals were presented as empire builders, those who united India and gave it law and order, peace and stability, the natural blessings of an imperial order. And the British themselves were merely the successors of the imperial rights of the Mughals and upheld the imperial authority of Delhi. Whatever elevated Mughal authority at Delhi elevated their imperial authority too. Facts sometimes compel the British historians to speak of cruelties and vandalism of the Muslim rule, but this did not stop them from upholding its authority. For they knew that the myth of imperialism is one, and that the glory of the Mughal rulers and the myth of their invincibility added to the glory and the myth of the British Empire itself. Thus, all these factors made the British give a new boost to the Muslim rule in India. While trying to legitimize their own rule, they also gave to their predecessor a kind of legitimacy which they never had in the eyes of the Indian people. In fact, in the larger national consciousness, the Muslim rule had as little legitimacy as the British rule had later on. Both were considered as foreign impositions and resisted as far as time, opportunity and prevailing power equation allowed it. But by the prevailing power equation जितना allow किया उतना तक ही opposition भी हुआ. But by the same token and for the same reason, this resistance, long and stubborn, was underplayed by British historians and presented as revolts or rebellions against the legitimate imperial authority of the centre. They felt, and quite rightly from their viewpoint, that Indian history should have nothing to show that its people waged many battles and repulsed many invaders. Thus, in this way, India came to have a history which is the history of its invaders, whose dominion its people accepted meekly. Muslim historians. Even before the British came to the stage, Muslim historians had written similar histories. Those histories were mostly annals written by scribes or munshis employed by Muslim kings. And you know, so many Hindus have the surname Munshi or the name Munshi, so you know what their ancestors were doing, right? The task of these annalists was to glorify Islam and their immediate patrons, a task which they performed with great zeal and rhetoric. In the performance of this task, they resorted to no moral or intellectual disguise. The glory of Islam and the extension of Darul Islam, the Muslim equivalent of the British Empire, was self-justified and needed no artificial props. They spoke of the massacres of the infidels, of their forcible conversions, of their temples destroyed, and of similar tyrannies perpetrated with great rejoice, as Sir H.M. Eliot points out. Hindu historians. The results were no better when the analysts employed happened to be a Hindu. Eliot again observes that from one of that nation we might have expected to have learnt what were the feelings, hopes, faiths, fears, and yearnings of his subjected race, but this was not to be. On the other hand, in his writing, there is nothing to betray his religion or his nation. With him, a Hindu is an infidel, and a Muhammadan one of true faith. With him, When Hindus are killed, their souls are dispatched to hell, and when a Muhammadan suffers the same fate, he drinks the cup of martyrdom. Shaheed. He speaks of the light of Islam shedding its refulgence on the world. But what comes next intrigues Eliot even more. Even after the tyrant was no more and the falsification of history through terror was no longer necessary, he finds that there is still not one of his slavish crew who treats the history of his native country subjectively, or presents us with the thoughts, emotions, and raptures which a long oppressed race might be supposed to give vent to. This tribe of Hindu munshis, or the slavish crew of Eliot, have a long life and show a remarkable continuity. Instead of diminishing, their number has multiplied with time. Today they dominate the universities, the media, and the country's political thinking. They were reinforced by another set of historians, those who carry the British tradition. One very important thing in common with them is that they continue to look at India through the eyes of Muslim and British rulers even long after their rule has ceased. Eliot regards the problem with moral indignation, but the phenomenon involves deep psychological and sociological factors. It is more complex than the question of patronage enjoyed or tyranny withdrawn. Hindus have lived under very trying circumstances for many centuries, and during this time their psyche suffered much damage. Short-term tyranny may prove a challenge, but long-term sustained tyranny tends to benumb and dehumanize. Under continued military and ideological attack, many Hindus lost initiative and originality. They lost naturalness and self-confidence. They lost pride in themselves, pride in their past and in their history and in their nation. They learned to live a lot of sort of underground life. Exactly right. Even today, in many Hindu households, especially in Bengali Hindu households, if you discuss problems with any Muslim neta around, or any Muslim invasion, or any historical Muslim atrocity, the first thing your elders will tell you is speak softly. So the fear has not gone away. And hence my claim that Marxists are the biggest Islamophobes, because in fact they have so much fear of Muslims that it is borderline phobia and irrational. And therefore they are in fact Islamophobes. They learn to live a sort of underground life, furtively and apologetically. Some tried to save their self-respect by identifying themselves with the thoughts and sentiment of the rulers. Exactly Marxists. They even adopted the rulers' contempt for their own people. These attitudes, imbibed over a long period, have become our second nature, and they have acquired an independence and dynamism of their own. We have begun to look at ourselves through the eyes of our rulers. One would have thought that all this would change after we attained independence, but this did not happen. It shows that to throw off an intellectual and cultural yoke is far more difficult than to throw off a political yoke. Exactly. And this is why you will not win with swords, guys. You will win with debates. By and large, we have retained our old history written by our rulers. The leaders of the nationalist movement are quite content with it, except that they have added to it one more chapter at the end which depicts them in a superheroic role. The new leaders have no greater vision of Indian history, and they look forward to no greater task than to perpetuate themselves. In fact, they have developed a vested interest in old history which propagates that India was never a nation, that it had not known any freedom or freedom struggle in the past. By sheer contrast, it exalts their role and proves something they would like to believe. By sheer contrast, it exalts their role, the role of the internationalists and the Congresses basically, and proves something they would like to believe, that they are the first nation builders, that they led the first freedom struggle India has ever known, and indeed she became free for the first time under their aegis. This highly flatters their ego, and to give themselves their unique status, we find that their attacks on India's past are as vicious and ignorant as those of the British and Muslim historians. No wonder histories continue to be written with all the contempt we learned to feel for our past, and with all the lack of understanding we developed for our culture during the days of foreign domination. A new source of distortion was opened during the period of the freedom struggle itself. Nationalist leaders strove to win Muslim support for the independence. for the independence itself. Nationalist leaders strove to win Muslim support for the independence struggle. In the hope of achieving this end, Indian nationalism itself began to rewrite the history of medieval times. Under this motivation, Muslim rule became indigenous, and Muslim kings became national kings, and even nationalists. Those who fought them began to receive a low score. R.C. Majumdar tells us now now this is Ram Swarup quoting a Bengali historian. R.C. Majumdar tells us how under this motivation, national leaders created an imaginary history, one of them even proclaiming that Hindus were not at all a subject race during the Muslim rule, and how these absurd notions, which could have been laughed at by Indian leaders at the beginning of the 19th century, passed current as history at the end of that century. Okay, the history that these Marxist historians were coming up with would have been laughed at the beginning of the 19th century, but they passed off as great scholarly work by the end of the century. So many articles on Indian Express in 1989. Marxists have taken to rewriting Indian history on a large scale, and it has meant its systematic falsification. They have a dogmatic view of history, and for them, the use of any history is to prove their dogma. Their very approach is hurtful to truth. But this is a large subject, and we would not go into it here, even though it is related intimately to the subject under discussion. The Marxists' contempt for India, particularly the India of religion, culture, and philosophy, is deep and theoretically fortified. It exceeds the contempt ever shown by the most die-hard imperialists. It exceeds that contempt. Some of the British had an Orientalist's fascination for the East, or an administrator's paternal concern for their wards, but Marxists suffer from no such sentimentality. The very Asiatic mode of production was primitive, and any superstructure of ideas and culture built on that foundation must be barbaric too, and it had better go. That's according to Marxists. Not many realize how thoroughly European Marx was in his orientation. And now, for a caveat, remember, Sitaram Goel is not some random right-winger who has listened to a few podcasts on Marxism, okay? Sitaram Goel and Ram Swarup have know Marxism inside out, okay? You have no idea how much they have read. Unless you read How I Became a Hindu, you won't know about their reading list. By the way, the Bengalis watching this, or anyone who understands Bengali, remember to subscribe to my Bengali channel, okay, where we have started discussing the book Hindutva Hindur Prakrito Itihash by Chandranath Boshu. The link is given in the pinned comment in the chat, okay. Not many realize how thoroughly European Marx was in his orientation. He treated all Asia and Africa as an appendage of the West, and indeed of the Anglo-Saxon Great Britain. Interestingly, there's a famous sociologist, very old. She is probably the head of the department in the sociology department at Calcutta University. Her name is Dr. Bula Bhadro. Her famous work was a criticism of Marx for having written this. Okay, she was criticizing Marx, saying that Marx was wrong to say that the Asiatic mode of production is all bad. Okay, she wrote that paper in 1984, but she got a job during CPIM's tenure. So that's interesting. He borrowed all his theses on India from British rulers and fully subscribed to them. With them, he believes that Indian society has no history at all, at least no known history, and that what we call its history is the history of successive intruders, what we have learned in our schools. With them, he also believes that India has neither known nor cared for self-rule. In fact, he rules out self-rule. This is Marx, okay? In fact, he rules out self-rule for India altogether, and in this matter gives her no choice. He says that the question is not whether the English had a right to conquer India, but whether we are to prefer India conquered by the Turk, by the Persian, by the Russian, to India conquered by the Briton. His own choice was clear. Indian Marxists fully accept this thesis, except that they are also near equal admirers of the Turkish conquest of India. Indian Marxists get quite lyrical about this conquest and find quite fulfillment in it. Let us illustrate the point with the example of M.N. Rai. We are told that he gave up Marxism, but he kept enough of it to retain his admiration for Muslim imperialism. He admires the historical role of Islam in a book of the same name and praises the Arab Empire as a magnificent monument to the memory of Muhammad. He hails Muslim invasion of India and tells us how it was welcomed as a message of hope and freedom by the multitudinous victims of Brahmanical reaction. Earlier, Roy had spoken of our country, which had become almost liberated from the Muslim Empire. But that was long ago, when he was merely a nationalist and had not come under the influence of Marxism. Marxism teaches a new appreciation for imperialism. It idealizes old imperialisms and prepares a people for a new kind of imperialism. What beautiful writing, guys! Phenomenal. This is true scholarly work. Its moving power is deep-rooted self-alienation, and its greatest ally is cultural and spiritual literacy. Marxist writers and historians of a sort are all over the place, and they are well entrenched in the academic and media sectors. They have a great say in university appointments and promotions, in the awarding of research grants, in drawing up syllabi, and in the choosing and prescribing of textbooks. No true history of India is possible without countering their philosophy, ideas, and influence. 1989. So far, I think if I had to rank the non-left authors that I have read, I have not read Dharampal as of yet, because he's also very respected in this circle. If I had to rank right-wing authors, I would say Sitaram Goel at rank 1, and Ram Swarup at rank 2. These two by far rank 1 and 2. And a little distant third would be Jaisai Deepak, little distant fourth would be Sanjeev Sanyal, and everyone comes far behind. Next chapter, and now I'll check some comments again. November 9 will change history. This is written by Jay Dubashi. This is the person who is on the left side of the thumbnail of this video, okay? He was a sort of a free market economist and a Sanghi. And BJP draws a lot of inspirations for their economics, or whatever the little amounts of capitalism that they do is from the ideas of Jay Dubashi. Okay, let me check some comments now. Karma, it is a basic teaching for us. Just salata kabe hole ekhoni korchi. Yes, Shivaji Maharaj needed both Shastra from his mother, Jijabai, and Kshetra that he used against invaders. Yeah, of course, Sine pe Shastra, Kamar pe Shastra. Otherwise, what are you even fighting for? But in the end, I think the long war, in the long run is going to be won by debate. The long war cannot be won by sword. But the short war, you have to stay alive to debate. No, so I'm obviously in favor of self-defense. Abhay is saying, Dada, do you know what Karnataka government did? Yeah, many things. They did some Karnataka language, Kannada language reservation, etc. Sheikh Sahil is saying, we Bengalis also converted to Islam to free us from Brahmanical marginalization and perceiving the egalitarian views of Islam. Sheikh Sahil, if people only converted because of Brahmanical oppression, so-called, let's say, for argument's sake, then why did so many Brahmins convert to Islam? Okay, what's the reason for that? First of all, you tell me that. You know, Akbaruddin Owaisi and all, many Kashmiri Pandits, their descendants are also today many big leaders in Pakistan, etc., right? So why did they convert? Secondly, you see, history, at least especially in the Bengal region, I don't know about this in the rest of the country, but in terms of Bengal, you are actually factually wrong to say that it was Brahminical oppression that led people in the arms of Islam. Okay, because when Muslim kings did reach these regions, this was not a very populated state. Okay, in terms of Hindu language, okay, in terms of Hindu theology. Societies are divided between places are divided between Nagara, Grama, and forest areas where forest dwellers live, who are not forced to buy into the Jativarna system or the four castes. Okay, hence they are called Panchamas. Now, the numbers of Nagaras and Gramas, so basically people who were inside the so-called caste system, that was minuscule. This entire Vanga region, Bangladesh, Bengal region, was majorly tribals or panchamas, Janajatis, okay, who were not inside the Hindu caste-based fold anyway. They were converted mainly by Muslims, so they were not even facing any oppression by Brahmins. And then there's enough evidence and scholarly research work to support my evidence. I'm not saying this as a random right winger, okay. And secondly, my second counter to you would be that why then, if Brahminical oppression led to Bengalis or anyone converting to Islam in India, Why did so many people elsewhere also convert to Islam? Was Brahminical oppression going everywhere, in every country? If you say yes, then we'll get further to this debate. First, you answered these two questions. Okay, let's start this new article. November 9 will change history. What happened on November 9? What is the need of the hour? Someone asked me the other day. Is it stability? Is it unity? Is it communal peace? It is none of these things, I told him. The need of the hour is courage. So this is Jai Dubashi's article, okay? We Hindus have become a timid race, almost a cowardly race. We lack the courage of our convictions. Some of us don't even have any convictions and have been trying to hide our shame under high-sounding but empty phrases like secularism. For the last so many centuries, the history of the Hindus have been created by non-Hindus, first the Mughals, then the British. Even today, the Hindus are being denied their right to write their own history, which to me is almost like genocide. Until we write our own history, this land cannot be ours. Upendra Bakshi, director of the Indian Law Institute and a noted jurist, said the other day that when the foundation of the proposed Ram temple will be put up in Ayodhya, it will change decisively the history of India, and no amount of condemnation of the Indian psyche or public self-flagellation will change that history. He is right. The whole purpose of the Ram Janmabhoomi movement is to change the history of India, nothing less, nothing more. Those who do not see this do not know what India is. For the first time in several centuries, the history of India is being made by Indians. Call them Hindu, call them anything else. If the word Hindu sticks in your gullet, as it did in Nehru's, call them Indian. Call them anything else. The Ayodhya movement is therefore a historic movement, far more historic than Gandhi's Dandi March or the Quit India movement. Freedom does not mean flying your own flag or having your own government. Freedom means making your own history, writing it in your own blood on the pages of time. Arre baapre. As I said earlier, fate precludes us from doing so for so many centuries. Now the time has come to open up the to open up the pages of time and begin writing what every great race in this world has been doing for so long. Every race except the Hindus. Small-minded people like Nambudripad. I have heard so much about this person. Who is he? Why is he hated so much in the Indian non-left, guys? I have no idea. Small-minded people like Nambudripad or editors of Indian Anglian papers who bring out special editions at Christmas time but never on Diwali will not understand this because they do not know Indian history. Whatever little they understand has been learned from foreign historians and from foreign books like Das Kapital. I recently bought Das Kapital. We must pity these men. Nambudripad thinks that the Ayodhya movement is communal, a word he has learnt from the British, for whom some of his friends spied, and he repeats it parrot-like, as children do their lessons in schools. Communists are political parrots who have been intoning Marx for years without realizing that the man is already out of date. All over Europe, his corpse is being exhumed for public exhibition. But Indian communists are half a century behind everybody else, including their own brethren elsewhere, because their own faith has come down crumbling, and that too in less than 3/4 of a century, they have started cursing other faiths. But we Hindus were not born yesterday. We were not born in the British Museum and did not emerge from dog-eared copies of ancient history books. We are history personified. History with a capital H. And we are going to survive for another 5,000 years, not just 50 years, as Nambudripad's gods did. Who is Nambudripad? I simply cannot understand what is so communal about a community trying to build a temple, the most honorable of acts in their own land. Would anyone deny Catholics their right to put up a church in Rome? Would anyone say no if the Saudis wanted to build a mosque in Makkah? Why on earth should there be a mosque in Ayodhya of all places? How would they feel if someone tried to build a Ram temple in Makkah? The Babri mosque was built by Babur, who had no business to be in India. Actually, it was not built by Babur, it was built in honor of Babur. He came here as a conqueror, but the right of a conqueror ceases as soon as he ceases to be a conqueror. Yeah, fair enough. This country is now ours, not Babur's, and what is all this? Not Babur's, and what is all this freedom worth? And what is all this freedom worth if we cannot undo a wrong? That is also what history is: the undoing of a patently wrong act committed by a conqueror in the full flush of power. This is what I meant when I This is what I meant. This is what I meant when I said that we are going to rewrite history for, I repeat again, that is precisely the meaning of freedom. I consider the time we were under foreign conquerors, no matter where they came from and who they were, and also how they came, as the most shameful in the time of our history. This is what Gandhi also said. That is why we vowed to throw the British out. If the British were foreigners, so were the Mughals, and so is everything they left behind. We have taken over old British firms and Indianized them. We have taken over their railways, their ports and harbours, their buildings, their offices, even their viceregal house. We would have been perfectly within our rights to demolish their leftovers, including the viceregal house. Mahatma Gandhi actually wanted to turn that house into a hospital. Surely if we can do all that, we can also take over their churches and cathedrals, as also those of other conquerors that preceded them. We have not done that, but I do not see why not. If the descendants of these conquerors believe that their houses of worship are too important to be treated like other buildings they left behind, surely you cannot blame the Hindus if they think that their houses of worship are also too important to be defiled by foreigners. What is good for others is also good for us. You cannot have one law for others just because they happen to be in a minority, and another for the majority because it happens to be too generous or too timid to fight back. Read this book for counter-arguments of this. Make no mistake, we are going to change history, and we have begun doing so on November 9, 1989. Oh, this came out in Organizer, RSS's paper. No wonder. From Shilanyas to Berlin Wall. Another article by Jai Dubashi. Let me check some comments now. We are not educated in Hindu principles of Samaj Shastra. Dada Sheikh Sahil will say everyone converted to Islam because it's the only one true religion. Yes, that may be the only true religion, but why did people convert to it? Why were they persuaded? How were they convinced? It did not happen through debate, right? That is my question to him. One of the original communists in India from Kerala, I see. I would disagree, the society is not Hindu at all. There is no Hindu principles are being followed in the society. Also, Muslims and Christians have maintained their caste identity even after conversion. Yeah. Socialist mindset is a deeply entrenched problem with the Hindu society. Yeah. If you go behind freebies, these will happen. Freebies banane khub maja kore hoyeche. I'm talking about rules concerning, okay. Dada, I designed some thumbnails for your videos. Oh, acha. Thank you. Mail me then. Mail me the JPG. Dada, Sheikh Sahil will say everyone convert. Okay. Then Arun is saying one of the original communists. Oh, yeah. Because we are too dependent on the government and do not have the self-confidence to do things on our own. Only self-confidence also won't work. Low taxes will have to come about, or temple economy that frees up children's education, hospital bills, etc. Exactly my point, that it is not a Hindu concept, so to be so dependent of the government, yeah, is an antithesis, yeah. These two groups are harming us. First of all, we need to dissociate from beams and Uga Bugas. Beams, Uga Buga क्या है भाई? इतना अगर डर है कि इतना कोड वर्ड में बात करना पड़ता है, तो क्या, तो करेज कब दिखाओगे? और इज सेइंग পড়ে দেখো পুরো হীরের মতো মানুষ। ও আচ্ছা নম্বুদ্রিপাদ, আচ্ছা। From Shilanyas to Berlin Wall. History has its quirks, but there is a method behind the madness. I said in my last column that November 9, 1989 would go down in history as one of those dates that actually make history. I was not aware at the time that on the very same day the first brick of the Ramshila Foundation was being laid at Ayodhya. The Berliners were removing bricks from the... Okay, on the same day the first brick of the Ramshila Foundation was being laid at Ayodhya, on that same day, the Berliners were removing bricks from the Berlin Wall. While a temple was going up in Ayodhya, a communist temple was being demolished 5,000 miles away in Europe. If this is not history, I do not know what is. There hasn't been a squeak out of our commie friends on Berlin Wall, or for that matter on the turmoil in the communist world that now lies as shattered as Hitler's fascist empire after the last war. Where is our great Mr. Noal, the ultra-verbose Pandit of Kerala, Nambudripad, who was only the other day was who only the other day was lecturing us poor Hindus on the pitfalls of communalism. Acha. Where is Harkishan Singh Surjit, the great oracle of Punjab, who since his operation in Moscow seems to have given up the ghost altogether? Even their great natural ally, the one and only VP Singh, has not said a word about the Berlin Wall, though he keeps advising us about what to do in Ayodhya, or rather, what not to do. The two events, one at Ayodhya, I've heard VP Singh or even Rajiv Gandhi, to definitely, they had, I think, no, not VP Singh. Yeah. VP Singh was opposed to the building of the temple, right? The two events, one at Ayodhya and the other in Berlin, are not unrelated. They are like the two events in Einstein's relativity theory, which appear totally unconnected but are not. They mark in the end of the post-Nehru era and the beginning of a truly national era in India on the other hand, and the end of the post-communist era and the beginning of a truly democratic era in Europe on the other hand. History has rejected Nehru in India and also overthrown communism in Europe. It is not an accident that the two events are taking place at the same time. Both Nehruism is a term coined by Sita Goel, which is the equivalent of today's coloniality. Both Nehruism and communism were phony creeds, though it has taken us though it has taken us a long ago. Wait, I can't understand this sentence. Though it has taken us a long time to see through the phoniness of these two creeds, Nehruism and communism. Some of us had seen it a long ago, but there were others, the so-called leftists and progressives, who had not. The scales have still not fallen from their eyes, but that is now only a matter of time. The phoniest are the so-called radical humanists in India, who have given up communist clothes but not the authoritarian way of thinking, which is the hallmark of communism. Their reaction to all popular movements is authoritarian. These men helped the British during the Quit India movement, just as their brethren, the commies, commies word use kar diya, commies did on the ground that an allied victory was more important than freedom for India. Now they are saying the same thing. According to the Tarkans and other phonies, the Nehru version of secularism is more important than full-blooded Hindu nationalism, which is what the Ayodhya movement signifies. The Tarkans, the Tarkan days, or the Tarkans, I don't know what that word is. The Tarkan days even went on, but someone we need to hate, I guess. The Tarkan days even went to the court on the issue, asking its help in stopping the Shila Pujan. The Pujan was a perfectly democratic affair carried on peacefully by citizens of this country who happen to be in a majority. If Indians do not have a right to have temples in their own country, who has? But this is not the way these secular worthies look upon the issue. These men are elitist by nature, and for them any popular movement, no matter how democratic and mass-based, is almost ipso facto suspect, if it does not meet their prejudiced convictions. This is Stalinism of the worst kind. The kind that led to the building of the Berlin Wall, one of the ugliest structures in the world. Who is Tarkan to decide that a temple in Ayodhya is antisocial? Who was M. N. Roy to decide that Gandhi's Quit India movement was anti-national and not in national interest? Who are these men who mock history and then are bloodied by it? They belong to the same class as Stalin in Soviet Russia and Hitler in Nazi Germany, who presume to know what is good for you and me, the ordinary mortals. And these men will go the same dusty way as the tyrants whose bodies are now being exhumed all over the Soviet Empire and thrown to the vultures. The men who presume to think what is good for the man in the street are the most... Right. Thomas Sowell calls these people the third-party, non-accountable intellectuals. The men who presume to think what is good for the man in the street are the most dangerous species and should be locked up in asylums. Jawaharlal Nehru was one such man. He knew what was good for you and me, just as Stalin and Hitler did, and for almost 20 years went on forcing his ideas on this hapless country. He and his advisors decided how much steel we should have and how much electricity. They decided who should get paid what and who should import what. They laid down laws for who should produce what and where, and whether a particular industry should be given to Tatas and or Birlas or some Babus in the government. What was the basis for these decisions? None at all. Similarly, an arrogant assumption that the big brother knows best what is good for you and you should not ask too many questions. Jay Dubashi's article, guys. Free market. Now, remember, some either Kanu Shandal or Charu Majumdar, one of the founders of the Naxalite movement, had actually had stood for elections and lost the elections, and then decided democracy is bad. Those who went to court on the Ayodhya issue are the same Mr. Know-alls, the arrogant busybodies who presume to know what is good for us. This presumptuousness that masses do not matter and do not count was the core of the Marxist doctrine of which Nehru's phony socialism and Tarkan's equally phony radical humanism are offshoots. What they have not till grasped, but Mikhail Gorbachev has, is this is precisely the reason Marxism failed wherever it has been put to work, and why Nehruism has failed in India. That is also the reason why there was no enthusiasm whatsoever for the Sarkari Jambori in the name of the Nehru centenary year, for the common man in India is a victim of this Nehruism, just as the common man in Russia is the victim of communism. And in healthy societies, victims don't celebrate centenaries of tyrants. There are a number of Nehru men in India, not only in the ruling party but also in the opposition, and we must be on guard against them. But this generation is on its way out, though their flame may flicker for a while. The post-Nehru era began at Ayodhya on November 9, and it will gather momentum in the years to come, just as the post-communist era in Europe and elsewhere. It will not be an easy task, but no greater task is easy. No great task is easy. This is also something Chandranath Boshu mentions in the introduction of his book, Hindur Prakrito Itihash. The footnote says the ruling party at the time this article was written was the Indian National Congress. Now, an article by Harsh Narain, another historian. The article is called Ram Janmabhoomi Temple, Muslim Testimony. All relevant British government records, followed by the District Gazetteer Faizabad, compiled and published by the Congress government in 1960, declare with one voice that the so-called Babri Mosque at Ayodhya is standing on the debris of a Ram Janmasthan temple demolished by the order of Babur in 1528. Syed Shahabuddin, JNU historians and self-styled secular scholars and leaders are hotly contested that the existence and demolition of such a temple is a myth floated by the British in pursuance of their policy of divide and rule. Syed Shahabuddin and many Muslim divines go a step further and assert that neither Babur nor any Muslim for that matter would take into his head to erect a mosque by displacing a temple, for they argue such a mosque would not be a mosque in the eye of the Sharia and would be liable to demolition by Muslims themselves. With this idea in mind, Syed Shahabuddin is going about proclaiming that if it is shown independently of the British sources that the Babri Mosque has displaced a temple, he would pull it down with his own hands and hand it over to the Hindus. This is Syed Shahabuddin saying this. The challenge is worth taking, and I hereby do it with good grace, on behalf of those who place truth above politics. Well, granting for the nonce that the Babri Mosque cannot be shown to have displaced a temple, there are certain other mosques which can indisputably be shown to have done so. Is Syed Shahabuddin prepared to keep his word in the case of such mosques? It is common knowledge that most of the mosques built by Muslim invaders stand on land grabbed or extorted from the Kafirs. And what about the Kaaba itself? Syed Shahabuddin Abdur Rahman, the well-known Muslim historian who died Syed Shahabuddin Abdur Rahman, the well-known Muslim historian who died in an accident recently, modifies the stand of the Muslim divines thus. It is also thinkable that some mosque was erected close to or at a short distance from a temple demolished for some special reason, but never was a mosque built on the site of a temple anywhere. Okay. As regards the verdict of the Sharia, it is true that there are theologico-juristic rulings to the effect that no mosque can be built on land grabbed or illegally legitimately acquired. See, for example, the great Fatwa-e-Alamgiri. But the volume 16, page 214. But the question is, do they hold true for land acquired in jihad as well? The answer has to be an emphatic no. The Prophet has made it clear that all land belongs to God or the Prophet. Alamu anil arza illahi wa rasulihi. And obviously, though the Prophet to the Muslims in Bukhari 2, Kitab al-Jibad, Wasiyar, Hadith 406. And obviously through the Prophet, okay. So, belongs to the God or the Prophet or through the Prophet. Iqbal puts the following words in a Persian verse into the mouth of Tariq, the great conqueror of Spain. Har mulk mulki mast ki mulki khudai mast. That is, all land belongs to the Muslims because it belongs to their God. Ibn Taymiyyah, the 14th century theologian and jurist, argues that jihad simply restores lands to the Muslims, to whom they rightly belong. This serves to vouchsafe to them the moral right to extort lands in jihad from others. Thus, the argument from the Sharia has no leg to stand upon. Now, I proceed to cite certain purely Muslim sources beyond the sphere of British influence to show that the Babri Mosque has displaced a Hindu temple, the Ram Janmasthan temple, to be precise, wholly or partly. First, an indirect evidence. First, an indirect evidence. In an application dated November 30, 1858, filed by one Muhammad Ashgar, Khatib and Muazzin Babri Masjid to initiate legal proceedings against Bairagiani Janmasthan, the Babri Mosque has been called Masjid-e Janamsthan, and the courtyard near the arch and the pulpit within the boundary of the mosque, Makam Janamsthan Ka. The Bairagis had raised a platform in the courtyard which the applicant wanted to be dismantled. He has mentioned that the place of Janmasthan had been lying unkempt, in disorder, parishan, for hundreds of years, and that the Hindus performed worship there. Makam Janamsthan ka sadha baras se parishan para rahta tha. Ahle hunud puja karte the. See Syed Shahabuddin Abdul Rahman, page 29 to 30 of that book. Well, if the Babri Mosque is the Janmasthan Mosque, its courtyard is the Janamsthan, and the Hindus had all along been carrying out their worship, all that implies that there must have been some construction there as part of a Janamsthan temple, which Mir Baqi partly demolished and partly converted into the existing Babri Mosque, with or without Babar's approval. And the Hindus had no alternative but to make do with the templeless courtyard. Otherwise, it is simply unthinkable that they might have been performing worship for such a long time and on such a sacred place without proper temple. Failure of jihad. My second document is the Hadikaya Shuhada by one Mirza Jan, an eyewitness as well as active participant in the jihad led by Amir Ali Amithawi during Wajid Ali Shah's regime in 1855 for recapture of Hanuman Gadi, a few hundred yards from the Babri Mosque, from the Hindus. The book was ready just after the failure of the jihad and saw the light of the day in the following year in 1856 at Lucknow. Rais Ahmed Jafri has included it as chapter 9 in his book entitled Wajid Ali Shah aur Unka Ahad, Lucknow, Kitab Manzil, 1957. After, however, omitting what he considered unnecessary, but without adding a word from his side. Now let us see what information we gather from it. Germane to our inquiry, this is Harsh Narain writing, okay, the historian. Now let us see what information we gather from it. Germane to our inquiry. Mirza Jan states that whatever they found magnificent temples of the Hindus ever since the establishment of Sayyid Salar Masood Ghazi's rule, the Muslim rulers in India built mosques, monasteries and inns, appointed muazzins, teachers and store stewards, spread Islam vigorously and vanquished the Kafirs. Likewise, they cleared up Faizabad and Awadh too from the filth of reprobation or infidelity, because it was a great center of worship and capital of Rama's father. Where there stood the great temple of Ram Janmasthan, there they built a big mosque, and where there was a small mandap pavilion, there they erected a camp mosque, Masjidi Muktasari Kanati. The Janamsthan temple is the principal place of Rama's incarnation, adjacent to which is the Sita ki Rasoi. Hence, what a lofty mosque was built there by King Babar in 923 after Hijri, 1528 AD, under the patronage of Musa Ashikan. The mosque is still known far and wide as the Sita Ki Rasoi Mosque, and that temple is extant by its side, or Pehlu mein wa der baki hai. It must be borne in mind that Mirza Jan claims to write all this on the basis of older records, Kutubi Sabika, and contemporary accounts. My third document is a chapter of the Murakai Khusrawi, otherwise known as the Tarikai Awadh, by Sheikh Azamat Ali Kakorawi Nami, 1811 to 1893. 1892 is the year the book by Chandranath Boshu was written, who happened to be an eyewitness to much that happened during Wajid Ali Shah's regime. The work was completed in 1869 but could not see the light of the day for over a century. Only one manuscript of it is extant, and that is in the Tagore Library of Lucknow University. A press copy of it was prepared by Dr. Zaki Kakorawai. What a weird surname. Kakorawi. Dr. Zaki Kakorawi, for publication with the financial assistance of the Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad Memorial Committee, UP Lucknow. The committee vetoed the publication of its chapter dealing with the jihad led by Amir Ali Amethawi for recapture of Hanuman Gadi from the Bairagis from its funds, on the ground that its publication would not be opportune in the view of the prevailing political situation, with the result that Dr. Kakorawi had to publish the book minus the chapter in 1986 for the first time. Later, however, he published the chapter separately and independently of any financial or other assistance from the committee in 1987 from the Markazi Abdi Urdu 137 Shahganj, Lucknow 3, under the title Amir Ali Shahid or Markai Hanuman Gadi. It is a pity that thanks to our thoughtless secularism and waning sense of history, such primary sources of medieval Indian history are presently in the danger of suppression or total extinction. Dr. Kakorawi himself laments that suppression of any part of any old composition or compilation like this can create difficulties and misunderstandings for future historians and researchers. Well, what light does our author Sheikh Muhammad Azmat Ali Kakorawi Nami have to throw on the issue of demolition versus non-existence of the Janmasthan temple? Let's see. Oh, wait, the window got blocked. Yeah. The opening paragraph of his book is akin to the passage quoted above from Mirza Jan's Hadikaye Shuhada. I give below the paragraph in the author's own words, omitting very few details. According to old records, it has been a rule with the Muslim rulers from the first to build mosques, monasteries, and inns, spread Islam, and put a stop to non-Islamic practices wherever they found prominence of kufr. Accordingly, even as they cleared up Mathura, Brindaban, etc. from the rubbish of non-Islamic practices, the Babri Mosque was built up in 923 after Hijri under the patronage of Sayyid Musa Ashikan in the Janmasthan temple, Butkhane Janmasthan Mein, in Faizabad, Awadh, which was a great place of worship and capital of Rama's father. Among the Hindus, it was known as Sita Ki Rasoi. The passage has certain gaps thanks to the wretched condition of the manuscript, which I have tried to fill within brackets. Dr. Kakorawi has appended to the book an excerpt from the Fasanai Ibrat by the great early Urdu novelist Mirza Rajab Ali Beg Surur, who died in 1867, which constitutes our fourth document. It says that a great mosque was built on the spot where Sita Ki Rasoi is situated. During the regime of Babur, the Hindus had no guts to be a match for the Muslims. The mosque was built in 1923 after Hijri, probably under the patronage of Sayyid Mir Ashikan. Aurangzeb built a mosque on the Hanuman Gadi. The Bairagis affected the mosque and erected a temple in its place. Then idols began to be worshipped openly in the Babri Mosque, where the Sita Ki Rasoi is situated. The author adds that formerly it is Sheikh Ali Hazin's observation which held good and quotes the following Persian couplet of the Sheikh: Bibin karamati butkhanai mara Sheikh ki chun kharab shawad khanai khuda garded, which means, O Sheikh, just witness the miracle of my house of idols, which when desecrated or demolished becomes the house of God, a mosque. So, purporting to mean that formerly temples were demolished for construction of mosques, the author, Surur, laments that the times have so changed that now the mosque was demolished for construction of a temple on the Hanuman Gadi. Clinching the issue. The forming fourfold documentary evidence leads us to certain incontrovertible conclusions, which can be stated as under: that in their zeal to hit Hinduism and spread Islam, the Muslim rulers had the knack of desecrating or demolishing Hindu temples and erecting mosques, etc. In their place, bigger mosques in place of bigger temples and smaller mosques in place of smaller temples. That there did exist a temple called the Temple of Janmasthan at Ayodhya, where Rama is believed to have incarnated, and that adjacent to it was what is called Sita ki Rasoi, which might originally have been part of it. That, like Muslim rulers who desecrated Mathura, Vrindavan, etc., Babur chose Ayodhya for spread of Islam and replacement of temples by mosques thanks to its supreme importance as a holy place of the Hindus. And in 1528, under the patronage of Sayyid Mir Musa Ashikan, got the so-called Babri Mosque erected in displacement of the Ram Janmasthan temple, certain relics of which appear to have persisted at least till 1855. That the Babri Mosque was also called Masjid-e Janamsthan and Masjid-e Sita ki Rasoi from long before 1855. That the Hindus had long been carrying on worship at the Ram Janmasthan even after the replacement of the Janmasthan temple by the Babri Mosque. That the foregoing facts are yielded by authentic Muslim records and have not been fabricated by the much maligned British to divide and rule. These conclusions are irresistible and should clinch the issue of demolition versus non-existence of the Ram Janmasthan temple. Indian Express, 1990, February. Okay. Next chapter again is written by Sitaram Goel, which we will do in another live stream. This was great. Let's see if any important comments are going on. Okay. Okay then, thank you for joining the live stream, guys. It's just 5:25. I'll try to come online once more again. Let's see what topic I have in mind. I'm planning to do a reaction to an interview by Christoph Jaffrelov. Let's see when I do it. Probably before evening, or maybe I'll do the Bengali one first. Remember to subscribe to the Bengali channel as well, okay? Pinned in the chat here. Okay. Thank you for joining the live stream, guys. Bye bye.